So Bernie Sanders was asked a dumb question yet again at his CNN town hall. Take a look.
Hi, Senator Sanders. So my father's family left Soviet Russia in 1979, fleeing from some of the very same socialist policies that you seem eager to implement in this country.
Mainstream news and corporate Democrats are freaking out over the prospect of Bernie Sanders being the Democratic Party nominee. To prevent this from happening, the mainstream news outlets are trying to confuse the American people over exactly what Bernie Sanders believes. There are three definitions of socialism that are being used in the American culture right now. Bernie believes in the first definition, using democracy and government to increase equality of income, wealth, and opportunity. The third definition of socialism is the one they're smearing Bernie Sanders with. Socialism can also be defined as authoritarian governments that plan all production, set all prices, and limit personal freedoms. This is more accurately called totalitarian communism.
So my question is, how do you rectify your notion of democratic socialism with the failures of socialism in nearly every country that has tried it?
And do you think that... Thank you for asking that question. Is it your assumption that I supported or believe in authoritarian communism that existed in the Soviet Union? I don't. I never have, and I opposed it. I believe in a vigorous democracy. But you have asked me the question about democratic socialism, fair question, and let me answer it.
When I talk about democratic socialism, you know what I'm talking about? Social security. One of the most popular and important programs in this country, developed by FDR to give dignity and security to seniors. And it has been enormously successful in reducing poverty among seniors. When I talk about democratic socialism, I am talking about Medicare, a single-payer health care system for the elderly. And in my view, we should expand that concept to all people. I believe that everybody in this country should be entitled to health care as a right, and the most effective way to do it is through a Medicare for all single-payer program. When I talk about democratic socialism, I'm not looking at Venezuela. I'm not looking at Cuba. I'm looking at countries like Denmark and Sweden.
Some information about Denmark and Sweden. They have relatively high gross domestic product per capita. GDP per capita measures economic output in a country per person per year. Norway is at $80,000 economic output per person per year. The United States is at $56,000. Denmark is at $52,000, and Sweden is at $49,000.
And you know what goes on in those countries? All of the kids who have the ability and desire go to college. And you know how much it costs? It is free.
Other things that go on in those countries is a lot of paid time off by the employer. There's 36 days of paid time off in Finland, 34 days of paid time off in Sweden. In addition to free healthcare and free college, in Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and Finland, there's also maternity leave when you have a child. There's 90 days paid time off for both parents in Sweden, and there's 120 days of paid time off for mothers in Finland.
They have child care systems which are outstanding. They have public educational systems which are extremely strong. The retirement benefits for their elderly, much better than they are in the United States.
Free college, free health care, a lot of paid time off, great retirement benefits, and maternity leave for parents. How is this paid for? It's paid for by more government spending and more taxation. In the United States, our tax burden is 26% of the economy, and government spending is 38% of the economy. In Sweden, the tax burden is 44% of total economy, and government spending is 49% of the economy, and the numbers are very similar over in Finland as well.
I happen to believe that in the United States, there is something fundamentally wrong when we have three families owning more wealth than the bottom half of American society. Something very wrong when 49% of all new income today is going to the top 1%. And something is equally wrong when we have a corrupt political system made even worse by this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision, which allows billionaires to spend unlimited sums of money to elect candidates who represent the wealthy and the powerful. So answer number one to your question is a radical idea. Maybe not everybody agrees, but I happen to believe we should have a government that represents working families and not just the 1% and powerful corporations.
Anybody here know how much Amazon paid in taxes last year? So here you have a corporation that made over $10 billion in profits, owned by the wealthiest guy in the world, and they paid zero in taxes. We will no longer accept the absurd situation where large corporations like Amazon, Netflix, and General Motors pay nothing in federal income tax.
That's the way the system works. You've got a government that works for the very rich, and we're going to change.
But he probably had a special place up there for whoever leaked a secret Citibank memo about their plan to rule the world. Back in 2005 and 6, Citigroup wrote 3 confidential memos to their wealthiest investors about how things were going. They reached the conclusion that the United States was no longer really a democracy, but had become a plutonomy, a society controlled exclusively by and for the benefit of the top 1% of the population, who now have more financial wealth than the bottom 95% combined. The memo gloated about the growing gap between rich and poor and how they were now the new aristocracy, and that there was no end in sight for the gravy train they were on. There was, though, one problem. According to Citigroup, the most potent and short-term threat would be societies demanding a more equitable share of the wealth. In other words, the peasants might revolt. Citigroup lamented that the non-rich might not have much economic power, but they do have equal voting power with the rich. One person, one vote. And that's what really scares them. That we can still vote. In fact, we have 99% of the votes, and they only have 1%. So why do the 99% put up with this? According to Citigroup, it's because the majority of the electorate believe that someday they will have a chance of becoming well-to-do themselves, if they just keep trying hard enough. The wealthy were pleased that so many people had bought into the American dream, while they, the rich, had no intention of ever sharing it with anyone.
When I talk about democratic socialism, I'm not looking at Venezuela. I'm not looking at Cuba. I'm looking at countries like Denmark and Sweden.
Bernie Sanders likes to talk about modeling our economy after the economy of Sweden or Denmark. Let's look at where those countries rank on the Heritage Foundation Index of Economic Freedom. You might be surprised to learn that those two countries in particular are not that very far away from the United States in terms of economic freedom. The United States is ranked as the 12th most economically free country on earth. Denmark is 14th, Sweden is 19th, Finland is 20th, and Norway is 26th.
The issue of this campaign, it is that word socialism. Some people like it. Younger people like it. Those of us like me who grew up in the Cold War and saw some aspects of it after visiting places like Vietnam, like I have, and seeing countries like Cuba being there, I've seen what socialism is like. I don't like it. Okay? It's not only not free, it doesn't frickin' work.
CNN actually sent a reporter to Denmark to check it out. And this is what he found out.
McDonald's is used in the debate over minimum wage. In Denmark, there is no minimum wage. But because of union negotiations, people who work at McDonald's here make almost $20 an hour. And even though things are very costly in Denmark, this Big Mac costs less than in the United States.
And it's going to cost him his life.
And it's going to cost him his life.
But, you know.
So isn't that interesting? They make $20 an hour at McDonald's. You mean they didn't hire machines to do it when it hit $15 an hour? I wonder why they didn't do that.
It sounds like the workers are empowered to advocate for their needs. He said they have unions, and that's why they make $20 an hour at McDonald's.
So Chris Matthews went nuts. Here's what. This is how. Now you tell me, honest to God, is Chris Matthews fucking hammered. Because this is the kind of people who are drunk say.
I have my own views of the word socialist, and I'll be glad to share them with you in private. And they go back to the early 1950s. I have an attitude about them. I remember the Cold War. I have an attitude towards Castro. I believe if Castro and the Reds had won the Cold War, there would have been executions in Central Park, and I might have been one of the ones getting executed. And certain other...
This sounds like this is what Sean Hannity says on Fox News, by the way.
No. This is what Alex Jones says. That they're coming and they're going to execute me. The socialists, they're going to give you health care and then kill everybody.
It's this old school, I mean, obviously, this is like what an old guy, that old narrative that Democratic Socialism is the same as Stalin-era totalitarian Soviet Union communism, and mind-boggling. You socialism, and in the 50s, Stalin's gonna parachute down and shoot me in the face, and... Like, I want to get on these shows and be drunk and just be like, I'm tired of the socialism, post office and schools and libraries and trash collection and street cleaning and the fire department and the police department and public parks and mail service and utilities and...
We need Medicare for all. We need a Green New Deal. We need living wages. And Chris Matthews, we're getting rid of that guy.
He gets even crazier. Watch this.
People would be there cheering, okay? So I have a problem with people who took the other side. I don't know who Bernie supports over these years.
I don't know. Maybe Bernie supports the people who want to execute me in the park. Maybe that's I don't know. I mean, if only Bernie had a public record for the last 40 years that I could look at. Obviously, I don't have the resources to do that. I don't have interns and millions of dollars. I mean, so I'll just have to talk off the top of my head. Maybe Bernie wants to execute people with Castro. I don't know. I'm paid to say this, and here I am.
I don't know. There's not like there's videos on YouTube that I could just use, if I had the internet, but the socialists shot the internet in the face at Central Park. And that's why I can't see Bernie saying the same thing for fucking decades.
What he means by social. 1 week it's Denmark. We're going to be like Denmark. Okay, that's harmless.
Then why did you say it like that? If it's harmless, first he says he wants to be like Denmark. All right, well, that's good. I mean, I kind of like Denmark. But why does he say it? Denmark.
Basically a capitalist country with a lot of good social welfare programs. Denmark is harmless.
It's pretty clearly in the Denmark category, yeah.
Are you sure? How do you know? Did he tell you that?
When I talk about democratic socialism, I'm not looking at Venezuela. I'm not looking at Cuba. I'm looking at countries like Denmark and Sweden. And you know what goes on in those countries? All of the kids who have the ability and desire go to college. And you know how much it costs? It is free.
Well, I mean, that's what he...
Are you sure? Are you sure? I mean, I hear him talk about Medicare for all and college tuitions, but are you sure he doesn't want to execute Chris Matthews? Are you sure? That's the kind that when guys start saying stuff like that, you take their car keys away. Does Chris Matthews think the Salem witch trials happened because people wanted health care? Because that's what it sounds like. Oh, okay. Hey, Chris Matthews went on to question Bernie's whereabouts during 9/11 and the day JFK was shot, just so you know. But this guy goes, Bernie, we need Medicare for all. Chris Matthews, please don't execute me. Okay. I got to play the rest of this, though. There's more to this. I want you to hear it in its entirety. I'm going to play this all the way through, just so you get how crazy this is.
I have my own views of the word socialist, and I'll be glad to share them with you in private. And they go back to the early 1950s. I have an attitude about them. I remember the Cold War. I have an attitude towards Castro. I believe if Castro and the Reds had won the Cold War, there would have been executions in Central Park, and I might have been one of the ones getting executed. And certain other people would be there cheering, okay? So I have a problem with people who took the other side. I don't know who Bernie supports over these years. I don't know what he means by social. 1 week it's Denmark. We're going to be like Denmark. Okay, that's harmless. That's basically a capitalist country with a lot of good social welfare programs. Denmark is harmless.
It's pretty clearly in the Denmark category, yeah.
Are you sure? How do you know? Did he tell you that?
Well, I mean, that's what he says, and that's what his agenda calls for, right?
Yeah,
He's not calling for any...
Let's see. Let's figure that one out.
But we haven't seen a campaign yet where video of him praising the other version, which is Castro, has been used.
Well, but
it will be used.
That's a question
we haven't seen how that plays.
Of how what the effect that has.
Well, what does he think of Castro? That's a great question. What did you think of Fidel Ismo? We all thought he was great when he first. I thought he was cheering like mad for him when he first went in, and then he became a communist and started shooting every one of his enemies.
Okay, hold those thoughts on the.
Put my tinfoil hat on when I talk about these interventionist foreign policy wars and regime change wars. The tinfoil hat thinks military-industrial complex. Yeah. People being asked or forced into making decisions that benefit these giant corporations that make weapons and profit off of war. Yeah. This is the worst case scenario in terms of conspiracy theories. The idea that someone wants war so that they can make money and they don't care if people die.
Well, you can take your tinfoil hat off because the military-industrial complex is a real thing.
Feeding the troops. The Pentagon has found some serious problems with Halliburton's work on that contract as well.
Pentagon auditors found that a Halliburton contract to provide food and housing for American troops had a staggering $1.8 billion in unsupported costs.
It was all a scam. Halliburton was charging $45 for a six-pack can of Coke or Pepsi that they give us and the military free in the mess hall.
Now, these sodas were made right there in the desert. It's not as if they were brought over from the United States. These sodas were made with Arabic wraps, you know, Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, whatever, right there in the desert. So it's not as if they had an exorbitant transportation rate.
They had the little mobile units that we had to put our clothes in, like a net duffel bag. Halliburton charged the government $100 for every bag of clothes they washed.
And you do get to change the way we spend money and stop spending money on these regime change wars. What would be the first thing you invested in this country?
That's what I often remind people is that right now, today, we spend $4 billion every month in Afghanistan. $4 billion.
Every month.
Every single month. Imagine what could be done with those dollars and those resources in communities like Baltimore.